Welcome to Economics Malawi. This is lesson 4, Introduction to Stata for Beginners. So today we want to develop a new skill for beginners, which is merging datasets. We want to, by the end of this lesson, to be able to merge 2 or 3 datasets into one dataset. So we are going to explain more through practice. So we're going to open our state application. So once we open our state application, we want to use datasets that are stored on desktop. So we're going to say change directories, which is represented as CD. Then we are going to define the path to the desktop, which is my path to the desktop is C semicolon is / users HP desktop. This is my directory where I'm storing the 3 datasets that I want to merge. So if I press enter, it means I've told Stata to be using files that are stored in the desktop, which means if I want to save some data, I will save in the desktop. Okay, so I want to use a dataset. I want to open the first dataset, which I will call the master dataset. So use dataset 1. Dataset 1 is stored on the desktop, and this is the dataset which I'm talking about. Dataset 1 is stored on the desktop, and there is this dataset 2, which is also stored on the desktop, and dataset 3. So my aim is to merge all these datasets, dataset 1, dataset 2, and dataset 3. That's what I'm doing. So I'm opening dataset 1 first, which I'll call it the master dataset. So the dataset has now loaded, and if we can browse, we'll see what data is contained in the dataset 1. So dataset 1 is the data we created in lesson 1. So it has got ID, age, sex, weight, age category, age times weight, height, and body mass index of a student. So there are 10 observations, 10 students in this dataset. But we want to merge with another dataset, which is dataset 2, has got the very same variables, ID, age, sex, weight, age category, so on and so forth. But in that dataset, the ID is starting from ID number 11 up to ID number 20, which means in this dataset we have got student 1 to 10, but in the dataset 2 we have got students number 11 to student number 20. So I want to merge these datasets to be one dataset. So it means number 11 will come just below here up to number 20. So we are going to run a command that will merge these two datasets. So we say merge is a command, and merge 1 to 1, which means we want to merge 1 to 1. You know, we have got an ID in each dataset. ID is a unique identifier for each student. So each student has got a unique identifier. Now in dataset 1, we've got IDs 1 to 10. In dataset 2, we've got IDs 1 to 11 to 20. So Stata will check whether there are identifiers which are matching. If they are matching, they will combine the data. Now merge 1 to 1. What do we want to merge? We want to merge all these variables, So as we have okay, so we have said merge 1 to 1, ID, age, sex, weight, age category, age times weight, height, and body mass index. We're using what? Using dataset 2. We want to use dataset 2. Dataset 2 is the name of the dataset. Doesn't mean each time you want to merge, you say dataset 1, dataset 2. No. Dataset 1 is the name of our dataset, and dataset 2 is the name of our dataset 2. So it could have another name apart from dataset. Maybe dataset 1 could be called tiger, dataset 2 could be called monkey, whatever. But don't confuse that when you are merging dataset 1 and dataset 2. No. These are the names of our datasets. So if I press enter, you can see the command has executed, and these are the results. And we don't expect them to match because the observations dataset 1 are containing different IDs, and the observations in dataset 2 are containing different IDs, so they are not matching. So not matched is 20. From the master dataset, which is the dataset 1, the merge is there are 10 observations, and the merge is equal to 1. And from the dataset 2, which is called using, there are 10 observations, and the merge is equal to 2. Not matched is equal to 0. So, and I mean matched is equal to 0, which means no observation in dataset 1 is containing the same ID in dataset 2. That's what this final result telling us. Now, if we browse our dataset, we'll see that indeed we have matched. At first we had 1 to 10, but now we have 11 to 20, which means we have matched two datasets. Dataset 1, which contained 10 observations, and dataset 2, which contained also 10 observations. So we have matched. We have now a bigger dataset which has got 20 observations. And this is a match variable. Stata, what Stata does is creates a match variable which summarizes what has happened. So master only, which means all these observations that are containing 1, they are from the dataset 1 only. And these observations containing the value 2 are from the dataset 2 only. Okay, so we have to drop this variable mesh. How do we drop this variable mesh? We use a command. So we are going to use a command to drop that variable. So drop the name of the variable is this and mesh. So we are going to type it as it is. So we are dropping this, and so you can see we have dropped that one. And if we go back to our data, we can see that that variable is no longer appearing in our data set. Okay, so we have created this, and now we want this one now is our master data set. So we want to merge it now with dataset 3. Remember, I told you that we want to merge 3 datasets. So I want to merge this dataset now with dataset 3. We want to merge with dataset 3. So what we'll do is we use the very same command merge, and we are still merging 1 to 1. But dataset 3 is containing observations from 1 to 20. Let me show you dataset 3 before we continue. Let me show you dataset 3. What is in dataset 3? Okay, so this is dataset 3. Let's see what is in dataset 3. Dataset 3 is containing IDs 1 to 20, but different variables from dataset 1 and dataset 2, which means the very same observations in dataset 1 and 2, but on different variables: college year, college accommodation, and GPA of a student, which means these datasets, these variables are not in the first dataset or second dataset, but they are variables. These observations are for the very same student which are in dataset 1 and dataset 2. So we want to measure them. It's like we want to add these variables in the data that we've collected for the students. So I'm closing this one. I just wanted to show you what is in that data set. So we continue with our merge command. So we want to merge this data set, which is the master data set that we have opened now, with data set 3. Okay, so we want to merge using ID and we are using data set 3, which is the name of our data set 3. So I am merging this data with dataset 3, and ID is the unique identifier. So we use the unique identifier. So if we press enter, we can see that the merge has successfully been done, and these are the results. Not matched is equal to 0, which means the IDs that have not matched are 0. It means all the IDs have matched. Remember, we had 1 to 20, and in the master dataset we also had 1 to 20. So all the IDs have matched, which means by now we have managed to merge our data. So you can see now the variables are more. The variables in dataset 3 were college year, college, accommodation, GPA, and these have been added to the variables in the dataset 1 and dataset 2. So we have managed to merge dataset that contained 1 to 10 with dataset that contained 11 to 20, and we have also managed to merge dataset that contained IDs 1 to 20 but on different variables. I wanted to show you how you can merge datasets in this data. Of course, you can practice, you need to practice, you need to create some two datasets and then try to merge. So once we have managed to merge, we need to delete the merge variable. So we are deleting this variable. So how do you delete it? You type the command drop. After typing the command drop, you can double click the variable that you want to drop and then press enter. We have managed to drop the variable now, as you can see. So if we go back to our data set, we see that we don't have the merge variable. So we have managed to combine data sets ready for analysis. This is what happens when surveys are being conducted. You may collect data for different modules: agriculture module, information and technology module, health module. So when data is entered as per a module, and then when you want to analyze data, you may want to analyze data, but variables are coming from different modules. What do? You merge the data sets. You merge data set from information and technology, from education module, from health module. You merge them into one data set and start your analysis. That is what happens. Yes, as for beginners, it's hard to grasp, but through practice, you can perfect your knowledge in this. Okay, so our variables like college here, we have to label them. Don't have variable labels here, so we have to label them. Label college, want to label college here, so say label college here, as year of study. Okay, so all right, we have made a slight mistake. Label variable, we have to say label variable. So we say label variable college year as year of study. I've managed to do that. And label variable college, and this is just simply as college. And we want to label variable accommodation. I want to label this variable accommodation again. And this is simply type of accommodation, and label variable GPA, which is grade point average of a student. Okay, so we've managed to successfully now create a beautiful data set, which now we call our merged data set. So we have got our data set merged properly, ready for analysis. So if we can summarize, the variables. We can describe the variables. You can see them. So we forgot to label ID, label variable ID. That's okay. Unique identifier, and then save. Thank you very much for being attentive in this lesson. Please attend the next lesson as you build more and more. Thank you.